Welcome today to Webinar Wednesday. I'm sure Sabrina is about to do the presentation and put the flyer up. It gives us the information for Webinar Wednesday. As always, for those of you who are live on Facebook, we welcome you to this webinar. Just a little bit of delay on our presentation, but if you'll be seeing it here in a moment, right, Sabrina? You're about to place it up there on the screen?
Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna place it up right now.
Well, thank goodness today is Hump Day. And again, thank you everyone for joining us for Webinar Wednesday. Now, today, we're going to bring an expert on speaking about legal business structure and why it's important to know the difference. Now, we know that we bring an abundance of wealth of information to ensuring that we're able to present to you that's going to help you support you the best way we can to get you through what we currently are experiencing and even achieve that next level of success. But today, I want to make sure that I before we get started, I want to inform you all about Buy Local Grow SA.
Yeah, I haven't shared it on.
Buy Local Grow SA, like I said, I wanted to inform you about Buy Local Grow SA. It's a one-stop shop of a website of resources for small businesses. Now with Buy Local Grow SA, it's a platform designed for business owners like yourself. Now, through the website, you're going to be able to access free resources ranging from procurement opportunities to promoting your business and increasing visibility for free. Now, we have some other new enhancements and features, such as having the ability to post your business promotions to your profile, which is also great to be able to get the community to get to know you. So if you're having a sale or producing a new product, you can use Buy Local Grow SA as another avenue to advertise your service or product. We also added procurement opportunities where you can save the ones that you're interested, along with the ability to post contract opportunities of your own. Now, the other thing too is it takes you about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to register. But once you register and you're approved, you can literally unlock new ways of doing business here in San Antonio. But as you know, a new opportunity has been presented through the Maestro Center, such as applying for the grant. Now, Bexar County Strong, it's building resilience in a small business of $15,000 grant. Now, the one thing that we want to make sure that you know is that the deadline was supposed to be today at 5 o'clock, but it's been extended to November the 6th till 5 p.m. Please ensure that you take full opportunities of this extended time. Now, if you can see some of the business qualifications, you have to have a 2019 annual review of at least 1 million from all business activities, have 10 full-time equivalent employees or less, has not received a Bexar County or city CFR grant or loan previously, and is limited to businesses that are located and will remain in Bexar County. You're also going to have to demonstrate a loss of at least 10%, as is stating below, and demonstration of activity and decline in the revenue. And this is just an extension to be able to support and strengthen our community. Now, the other thing I want to make sure that we know, and as Sabrina's going to flip to the next slide, is that we want to ensure that we thank those who are here to support us, right? We want to thank HEB, those who are here to make it possible, right? HEB, the City of San Antonio, Economic Development Department, Wells Fargo, and as you can see down below, all those who support us to ensure that we are bringing the necessary resources to our small businesses
hear about it
and emphasize, resources that are available to you. However, today you're not here just to hear about, the resources and those who come and support us. You're here to hear an expert in her field. Now, Barbara Lamar is that expert. Now, Barbara has provided legal and accounting support to small businesses and their owners for more than 30 years. One of her primary goals is to make sure that those fees paid will be profitable investments for her clients. For every dollar paid to her firm, she wants her clients that should gain more than $1 in taxes saved or increased business profit. Now, Ms. Lamar is also a business owner, so therefore she has a really good understanding of the challenges of operating a small business And like always, as you see, being that subject matter expert is extremely valuable to our community. Welcome, Ms. Lamar. It's quite a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Juanita. Let's see, do I need to do anything to show me? I just see a blank up there on the screen. Let's see.
If you can also go where it has the little video camera on the left corner to make yourself visible.
Oh, here we go. Start video. Here we go. Hello, everybody.
Oh, what a pleasure to see you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I learned probably as much from my clients as they learn from me. And I'd like to just start out by telling stories of what can happen to people. I wish I had a better idea of who's in the audience. But I'm going to go through these different types of entities one by one and sort of tell a story about people real life people that have been my clients that have used these different kinds of entities. And I have to change the names and any identifying characteristics of the business to preserve confidentiality, but this is real life stuff that really happens. So
absolutely. Well, we certainly value when you guard the integrity of our businesses. That's very appreciated. And the fact that you have over 30 years of experience with our community is amazing. So we're really looking forward to learning what you have to help us be better business owners.
Okay, so let's see. I should be sharing my screen right now, but
what I see in front of us is the entity types. Is that what we're starting with?
Excellent. All right, it worked. Okay. So
absolutely.
The sole proprietorship is the very easiest kind of business to form. It's a one-person business, and you just start doing whatever you're going to do. It's that easy. You don't even have to open a separate bank account for it. Although I recommend doing that just because it's a lot easier to keep track of your accounting that way. As you'll see, though, you can run into problems with that. So, and just so I'll keep this straight I tend not to like to read stuff off, but since we're going to do this from the written part later, I'll try to hold to this script. So let's take an example of Roland. And Roland's dad was a master plumber, and Roland worked with his dad, all through junior high and high school, and learned a lot about plumbing from his dad. And so Roland right now, he started out working as a driver delivering for Amazon. But on the side, he started helping his friends with plumbing jobs. And it got to where that he's spending his whole weekends doing that. And he says, hey, I could make money. I could do this on the side and make some extra money. And he starts doing that. And with a sole proprietorship, like I said, you can just start doing it. You don't have to register with the state or anything. And he realizes at some point, hey, I'm making more money doing this than with my day job. So he starts doing this full time. He persuades his dad to let him work under his dad, who's a master plumber, so that he can get licensed. And he's moving, right? He's making good money. He buys a boat. He buys a second house to have as a rental property, as an investment. And things are looking really good for him. And then one day, one of his assistants that he's hired starts a fire. He's soldering a copper pipe, and somehow a fire starts. And this is a true story. This really did happen to one of my clients. And it burns down, it burns the whole wing of this house. And Roland gets sued. He doesn't have any kind of liability protection. Now, my client in real life did. I wouldn't let this happen to one of my clients, but I've seen cases where this did happen, where they didn't have any kind of protection. They didn't have a limited liability company or a corporation. And so they just get sued personally. And if they lose the lawsuit, which is very likely to happen if one of your employees burns down one of your client's houses, you're going to lose some of your assets. And in my scenario, Roland loses his boat and his rental property. So he basically loses everything he's worked for. And we'll come back and talk about how he could have prevented that kind of loss in a moment. I'd like to go on to the partnership form of business. And it's like a sole proprietorship, except for more than one person. And it's where, you know, 2 or 3 people get together and say, hey, let's start a business. And in the scenario, in the story, I'd like to share 2 women get together. Deanna and Rosa get together and start a hair salon. And they're both good at what they do. They're both really friendly. People like them, and their business does great. And everything's doing well. They're saving up. Deanna's saving up for her college fund for her kid. Rosa's saving up to get money to put a down payment on a new house, and everything's looking great. And then this guy comes in with really long hair and says he wants his hair bleached white. And they warn him, hey, this is not going to be good for your hair. And he's like, I don't care. I want it done. And so they apply the bleach. And when they're rinsing it out, the guy's hair breaks off really close to his scalp. So he's like, not all the way bald, but he looks like he has a buzz cut. And he's like, wait a minute, I'm in a band. I'm like in a heavy metal band, and my trademark is my hair, and you've ruined my business. And he sues him. And even though they warned him about it, and he said, no, go ahead, he wins the lawsuit. And they lose all the money they've saved up. So what could you do to protect yourself against this kind of thing? One thing, Roland should have had insurance. He should have had insurance that would cover something like what happened with his employee. But sometimes the insurance coverage is not enough. So one thing you can do is set up a registered entity with the state of Texas that will limit your liability to the assets that are in that company. And going back to the chart, the limited partnership is one way, but I don't want to talk about that too much right now because I really don't recommend that to people. Sometimes it's used in real estate partnerships. It can be useful when you want to have some silent investors. And if anyone in the audience is interested, I'll be happy to talk more about it. But probably the best entity Texas has to offer for a small business is the limited liability company. It actually gives somewhat better liability protection than a corporation because it not only protects the members of the LLC, the owners of the business, from some liability associated with the business. For example, it would have protected Roland for a mistake one of his employees made. When he got sued, when the business got sued, it would have been very hard for the plaintiff to come through and sue Roland personally. So the limited liability company says, hey, if someone has a claim against your business, it stops with the business. It doesn't come through to your personal assets. The limited liability company also offers protection the other way around. So if, for example, Roland got sued on the personal side, he's in a terrible car crash or something and he gets sued. If he had a corporation with shares, the person suing him that won the lawsuit could take his shares and say, hey, I'm going to liquidate this corporation, or I'm going to take it away and run it, or, you know, whatever they want to do. With a limited liability company, they can't do that. They have to go to court and get a charging order to get at assets as the owner takes the assets out. The limited liability company, besides giving really good two-way liability protection, is very flexible to run. And so there aren't as many requirements as there are for a corporation. So like, you don't have to have officers if you don't want to. You don't have to have annual meetings if you don't want to. It's a whole lot more flexible. And we'll talk in a little while about the tax flexibility too. It's very flexible as far as federal taxes. So if Roland or if Deanna and Rosa had this form for their business, if they had registered a limited liability company with the state of Texas, when they got sued, the people suing them couldn't have gotten at their personal assets. They could have gotten at the assets that are in the company's only. And you can get through, it's called piercing the corporate veil. You can get through to the individual owners, but it's very hard to do that in Texas. You almost have to show that there was fraud or that the entity is just a shell that was being used to evade liability. There's something called a professional limited liability company. That's basically the same thing as a limited liability company, except that all the members have to be licensed in the same profession. And so, for example, my law CPA firm is divided into two parts, and one is a CPA firm, and my partner and I are both certified public accountants, and nobody else can be a member unless except another CPA. And then on the legal side, I have a legal PLLC. LLC is like what people that like the short form of limited liability company. So that's what that is. Some people like that because it makes them seem more professional. In addition to lawyers and CPAs, architects use it, doctors use it. Some people setting up like PA, like physician's assistants use it. So anything where you're licensed. I don't think I've seen people like plumbers use it, but in theory you could. The other form is what's listed on the chart as a C corporation. That C part is really to do with a tax election. A corporation is a corporation. And in one of the handouts that you're going to get, there's an article on what exactly is an S corporation and a C corporation. Under state law, you are a corporation or you are an LLC forever, unless you go in with the state and do some kind of reorganization. But for federal tax purposes, you can choose to be taxed as though you're something else. And that's one of the most confusing areas of the tax law there is, because you're one thing under state law and another thing under federal law. And it gets really confusing with payroll, for example. You know, if you're filing your tax return as a disregarded entity, are you liable for all of your payroll taxes or just your withholding? Are you personally liable? We can get into that later when we talk about taxes, but a corporation gives you the same liability from the business side to protect your personal assets as an LLC. It's less flexible than an LLC. You're required to have certain officers. For example, you have to have a president and a secretary. You're required to do that or you're not a valid corporation. And you have to have annual meetings. A lot of people don't do this. And then if they get into some kind of trouble, someone that's challenging them, like the IRS or like someone that's suing them, can try to get through to them personally by saying, hey, you didn't do things right. You don't have a valid corporation here. So the corporation is, it's just more expensive and harder to run than an LLC. It doesn't allow you the same, quite the same tax flexibility. There are some reasons I recommend it to people. One being that you can make a Section 1244 election so that if you end up if your business doesn't do well, you can deduct your loss when you liquidate your stock as an ordinary loss instead of a capital loss, which can be really helpful. And you can only do that with a corporation. A professional corporation, it's like the professional LLC. It's like a corporation, except everyone in the corporation has to be licensed in the same profession. The nonprofit, I think, if there are people in the audience that want to talk about that, I'll be happy to talk about it. But I think our goal today is to focus on business entities. The nonprofit is one form of business entity you can form in Texas. And I'll just mention briefly the series LLC, which is often, or I should say mostly used for real estate deals where you've got a number of companies and you want to isolate them from each other. So that if you have an apartment building, for example, let's say you have 3 apartment buildings and you don't want a lawsuit that involves one of them to affect the others. You can set up these series of different companies under one hub where they're protected from each other. If there's some kind of legal liability with one, it's not going to affect the other. And you can accomplish the same thing by setting up just some different LLCs. The difference is that with the series LLC, you only have to set it up once. And when you form the series, it's not like you're registering a whole new company. And yet, under the law, it's a separate entity, a separate legal entity, and under the tax law, it's a separate taxpayer. And I think we were going to talk about the different, just introduce the entities first and see if anyone had any questions, and then move on to the formation and how to operate them. Does anybody have any questions? I don't, let me pull up the chat here.
Very good point, Ms. Lamar. I appreciate you opening up for questions because sometimes it is kind of difficult to understand the different entities and how they really apply to us. So at this time, we are opening up the floor. If you have any questions about these entities, or maybe you're in one entity at the moment and you want a better understanding on how you're functioning, here's the subject matter expert, Ms. Lamar. So
I would love to hear some questions. Yeah, just to know what people are interested in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
And
those of you who are live as well, I know that we're not able to get your questions here on the chat, but please take the opportunity to email them. And I'm sure our support from the Maestro Center will ensure that we get those questions. Now, Ms. Lamar, you said that you're able to kind of clarify a little bit more about these entities and how to, as we wait for questions to come up, on
Mhm.
how to maybe address them within and maybe create them. You were mentioning that.
sure. To create a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, all you have to do is just start doing business. And you can file what's called an assumed name certificate or a DBA. For example, in the story about Roland, who had the plumbing business, he could just do business under his own name, or he could call it, like high quality plumbing or something like that. He could call it a name that doesn't involve his own name. And to do that legally, he would file an assumed name certificate with the county, any county where he's going to be doing business. And so that filing that assumed name certificate, sometimes people think, oh, now I've got a business entity, I'm good. But that doesn't change that that doesn't not make you a sole proprietor. You're still a sole proprietor and you're still liable for any kind of
Okay. Now,
claim anybody might have against your business. So,
Ms. Lamar, I have a question from one of our participants, and
okay.
it says, Ms. Garcia, and thank you for providing us this question. Is if I'm already registered as an S corp, would I be able to change it to an LLC?
That's an S corp is not an actual entity that the state of Texas offers.
Mhm.
You can be an LLC and make an election to be taxed under federal tax laws of S corporation. And so Ms. Garcia may already have an LLC, and there's just been a tax election made to have it taxed as an S corporation. If that's the case, it's very easy to terminate that election. It's easier to terminate it than to get it in the first place. But what she would need to do is look at her formation documents when her company was set up and figure out exactly what it is, because there is no such animal as an S corporation. Under Texas state law, you're either an LLC or a corporation. And so that would be the first step, is find out exactly what you are. And if she were sitting here in front of me, I would ask her, what are your goals? Why do you want to change the form of your entity? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Because there's always always a way to do something. There's always like multiple ways to accomplish something. And so that's one of the first things I always ask clients is, what are you trying to do here? And sometimes we can think of a way that's better than what they originally thought of. So some accountants I've noticed are real bad about saying, oh, you can't do that. And I tend to approach it like, hey, let's see if we can figure out a way to do what you want to do. But that's what I would say to Ms. Garcia is figure out what you actually are under state law first.
Well, I hope that's helped you, Ms. Garcia. Now we have another question, Mrs. Bodner. It says, I have been a sole proprietor, an LLC, for several years. My tax consultant has recommended that I become an S corp to help with my tax burden. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that can be a good move. There's sort of, I actually have that, if we have time to go through it later, a spreadsheet that's like a decision-making tool. When you make an S election, you all of a sudden have to file an extra tax return, because as a sole proprietor, you file your taxes on your Schedule C on your individual tax return. Once you make that S election, you have to file a Form 1120S. And I can share, let me see. Let me see if I can share that on the screen. Did the Form 1120S come up on the?
No, ma'am, not yet. Tricky thing, this technology, isn't it?
Well, I'm technologically challenged with this particular with Zoom.
Aren't we all,
Okay,
ma'am? Aren't
share
we all?
screen. Let's see. Now there should be something that says switch documents, but share screen. Let's see.
Now, while we're actually working on this, on being able to share this screen, now, if you want to receive a copy of this documents, please submit an email to mighty@maestrocenter.org. Sabrina's going to be able to put that information, in the chat box to make sure that everyone has access to that. But also, always remember that if for some reason you have a question and you weren't able to apply it, reach back out to us, because we have some great relationships with our subject matter expert, Ms. Lamar. And I know that she's been able to spend time from her busy schedule. It says, I have another question while you're looking at that, Ms. Lamar, is what was the DBA? And as well, and that is from Ms. Gomez. And Mrs. Zuniga says, how does the 2553 play on this formation of an LLC? These are some great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, they're wonderful questions. I love it.
Right.
Since I'm having a problem sharing my screen, I should have done those slides like Sabrina told me. I should have done those PowerPoint slides, but
absolutely.
Anyway, so just I'd like to answer the lady's question about the S election first and take these in order.
Of course.
And so you have to file a separate tax return that's an 1120S, and then it issues a Form K or Schedule K1, and you take that and report it on your personal tax return on Schedule E. So it makes your taxes more complicated than when you are a sole proprietor. And so you have to factor that in. You also, at some point, the S corporation, it's actually on LLC that's filing its taxes as an S corporation. At some point, it will probably have to start paying you a salary. So you're going to you'll have the cost of processing payroll and filing forms W-2 and your quarterly 941s and all of that stuff that comes with doing payroll. So there are expenses associated with forming that S corporation. What you save in taxes is self-employment tax. When you file on Schedule C as a sole proprietor, 100% of your net income is subject to self-employment tax. And what that actually is Social Security and Medicare, and it's 15.3% of your net profit. So that can kill you. I mean, look at it, like if your net profit is $100,000, that's $15,300 you have to pay in self-employment tax. Your net profit from your S corporation is not subject to self-employment tax. So as long as you don't pay yourself a salary, you're saving 15.3% of your taxes right there. I mean, it's saving you. So like if you had a $100,000 net profit, it would save you $15,000 on your taxes. And that's going to be way more than the cost of doing the extra tax return and processing your payroll. There is a little tiny glitch, though. The IRS frowns on that because they want you to pay that Social Security and Medicare tax. So if they audit you, they're going to say, hey, some of this net profit should have been salary. And they're going to try to do what they call recharacterize that net profit. And they'll look at how much you actually took out. And let's say you had a $100,000 net profit and took out $90,000. they're going to say, hey, that 90,000 should have been salary. And guess what? You owe Social Security and Medicare tax on it. So you can't, at some point, you probably are going to want to pay yourself a salary. I've seen people who never did, and they never got into trouble, but I just, I advise clients, hey, I've seen people who did get into trouble too. So you probably want to pay yourself a salary. So you're not going to save your entire 15.3% of your entire net profit, but you can save money. And that's when you look at this spreadsheet and say, all right, is the money I save from not paying self-employment tax gonna be more than what I have to pay to do an extra tax return and process payroll? And that's just, it's pretty simple, really. It's kind of tedious working through the numbers, but that's what you need to look at to make that decision. So I think the next question was, are there any more questions about that, about the making that choice for the S election? I'm guessing that's what her CPA or her tax preparer meant by, I'm guessing that's where she was going with that, is to save on self-employment tax. I think the
And
next.
I'm assuming, I'm assuming, Ms. Lamar, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong, that some of these recommendations is really based on an individual and the business itself. Is that correct?
Totally. And just be aware that anything I'm saying right now is general advice. One teeny tiny change in the facts can make a huge change in the ultimate thing you want to do. And so do not take anything I'm saying here as personal advice to you. I would need to sit down and talk to you and know the specific information about your business.
Of course.
But hopefully what I'm saying can help people, just get a general idea, and then take this information to your tax return preparer and start asking questions.
Absolutely. Now, the next question, Mrs. Lamar, is what is the DBA? Some people are wondering, again, some of us are very knowledgeable, and some of us, such as myself, have constant questions. And I'm going to ask the same question that Ms. Gomez says. This is, what was the DBA?
That's a great question. That is really a good question. And what it is, the way you do it is you go to the Bexar County website, and one of their choices there is, I think it's under business, and then you click on assumed name certificates, because the DBA stands for doing business as. And the reason people call it a DBA is that when you sign as the sole proprietor, you sign a document, you might say Roland Rodriguez doing business as Exceptional Plumbing. So to be able to say you're doing business as something that's not your actual name, you file this assumed name certificate. And it's really easy to do. It's not expensive. I don't know the exact cost, but it's not very much. And you go to the Bexar County website, you can fill it out online. I think you can submit it. I think you can do everything online. And then you're good to go. And you can put on your business cards, Exceptional Plumbing, whatever. You don't even have to put your real name, because you've filed this assumed name certificate. I mean, if I wanted to do business under the name, Candy Smith or something, I could file an assumed name certificate and do that. I couldn't, as a CPA and attorney, I couldn't do that, because there's ethics rules that say I have to practice under my real name. But if I wanted to start a business on the side, say remodeling houses or something, I could file a DBA or an assumed name certificate and do business under that other name. you can't use a name that's someone else's name. You know, you can't use something that's misleading. There are certain restrictions on what you can do. The important thing to remember, the most important thing, and where I see people who get confused and then get in trouble because of it, is that filing this assumed name certificate only allows you to do business under a different name from your own. It doesn't give you any sort of limitation on your liability. So somebody could sue Excellent Plumbing and they'd still be suing Roland Rodriguez. So that's the assumed name certificate and or DBA, they're one and the same thing. All it does is allow you to use a different name.
Of course. Wonderful. Now, I'm going to come back to the next question Mrs. Gomez has is, can I file a DBA and not be a business, like doing taxes and all? And she says, she's apologizing in advance because she says she has zero knowledge about this. Ms. Gomez, welcome to the club. There's so many of us. That's why we're here. And this is why Ms. Lamar is here, because we want to make sure that you're educated and that you have a good understanding. And if not, ask more questions. Mrs. Zuniga, we haven't forgotten your question, and we're going to get to that next.
Yeah.
So how can she, so the question again is, can I file a DBA and not be a business?
Is she still available to ask for clarification? Why would you want to do that? You have to be a business. You can't just say, hey, I want to go by a different name. To change your name legally, your personal name, you would need to file a petition for a name change in the state district court. And you can do it. You can absolutely change your name. But if it's not a business, if you're just changing your personal name, you do it a different way. And I think maybe that's what she's asking. She wants to change her personal name. And you absolutely can do that, but you do it in district court rather than filing an assumed name certificate.
Perfect. Thank you. It says, now, Mrs. Suniga or Mr. Suniga, so I apologize. It says, how does Form 2553 play into formation of the LLC?
Okay, it does not. It has nothing to do with the formation of the LLC under Texas law. Form 2553 is an IRS form, and you file it to make an election to be taxed as an S corporation. And this is like so confusing. This is probably like one of the most confusing, well, until they passed section 199A for the qualified business income deduction. It was like maybe the most confusing part of tax law. So let's say you have an LLC that you formed and you're paying, like, you have a net profit of 100,000 and you don't like that you're paying 15,000 in self-employment tax. I wouldn't like that. I don't really know too many people. I don't think I've ever met anyone that likes them. So you decide, all right, I'm going to make an S election so that I don't have to pay all this self-employment tax. You would file Form 2553, and you have a limited time window to do this. You can do it every tax year. You've got 2 months plus 15 days to do this. So like if you were starting out in 2021, let's say you want to make the election starting in 2021, you'd have till like March 15th to make this election. You can make a late election, but it's more complicated. You can actually file this form with your tax return if you're doing it in a timely manner. But the Form 2553 is an IRS form. It does not change what you are under state law. So you are still a limited liability company under state law, even though I hear people all the time refer to S corps, but that's just the way you're filing your federal taxes. Under state law, you're still a limited liability company. You still have the flexibility of not having to elect officers, not required to do annual meetings, and all the advantages of a limited liability company. So the 2553, you might say it's part of the formation if you're doing it all at the same time, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with setting up the LLC. It's a tax election only. And I actually, there's an article on that to hand out because this is so confusing. I mean, just like almost everybody that exists in the world that you know, in the United States has been confused about this. So if that doesn't answer the question, please keep asking questions.
Absolutely. Now, Ms. Lamar, I have Ms. Garcia question. It says, Bexar County returned my check for the assumed name renewal and said that all assumed names are now being done by the state. Were you aware of that?
I was not, really. I was not aware of that, huh? So
Well,
do you go to the Secretary of State's website? Let me check that out. Let's see.
That's some good information. If not,
Sure.
maybe
Thank you
maybe
so
this
much
is
for
where,
bringing that. Yeah. Let's see.
maybe this is where something that the Maestro Center will definitely post, because that's some vital information for our.
This is something new, yeah. Assume name certificate preliminary name search. Let's see. Secretary of State. Assume name certificates. Okay. I mean,
Well, thank you for sharing, Ms. Garcia.
Now, if they're the one, if it's an entity that you're doing an assumed name for, yeah, you've always done it through the Secretary of State, and it's possible that that's what she's talking about. It's on, let's see. I'm going to need to check on this because I know you always file assumed name certificates for registered entities with the Secretary of State, but to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware that they're doing assumed name certificates for individuals. But if you have a sole proprietorship, Ms. Garcia, or was it Ms. Gomez? I'm sorry.
No, that was Ms. Garcia. That was Ms. Garcia, right?
Ms.
That was Ms. Garcia. Thank you, Ms. Lamar.
If you tried to file an assumed name certificate for you as an individual and you got that letter back, that's really interesting. And that's something I'm going to need to look into. And thank you so much for bringing that on. Because that's a new one on me.
She says, Ms. Garcia says, maybe that's why I'm an entity. That may be it.
Oh, okay, that's why then. Yeah, if you're an entity, then yes, you would file with the Secretary of State. The county is just for sole proprietorships and general partnerships.
Wonderful.
So.
Now, Mr. Suniga, thank you for clarifying, Mr. Suniga. He says, can we speak on multiple versus single member LLCs?
Sure. Wow, I don't even know where to start. Do you have a specific question you'd like to ask, or you want me to just start talking about them? I mean, I could go on all day about.
Is there a specific area, Mr. Suniga? Because we want to make sure that we target your need. We've got a couple of more minutes, and these are great questions, especially the great information that we've became aware of that was brought up by Ms. Garcia. But is there a specific question about multiple versus single? And the other thing too is, let's address Ms. Gomez. It says she's not quite moving, into that DBA yet, but she's responsible for. It says, so maybe the right question is, what is the responsibility attached to getting a DBA?
The responsibility? You have to make sure you do a name search. And by the way, I'm looking at Bexar County, and you still get individual assumed name certificates through the county. So I think Ms. Garcia probably has a LLC or a corporation. And those, yes, you do go through the Secretary of State, but if you're a sole proprietor, it looks to me like you still go through Bear County, because I'm looking at their website right now. And
Great.
you file it with the county clerk. And if anybody has questions, you should have my email address somewhere there, and just feel free to email me and I can send you a link to these various websites where you can register these things. But your responsibility in filing an assumed name is, first of all, to check and make sure you're not taking somebody else's name, and make sure it's not misleading. Like if you called yourself Wendy's Super Hamburgers, you'd have a lawsuit on your hands from Wendy's, because if you can't use a name that's deceptively similar to somebody else's name.
Excellent.
Now,
Now, Mr. Zuniga says, I was wondering what is best, because more people, more problems. So what would be the best way to address about the, I believe his question was multiple versus single members LLC.
Okay, got it. You are absolutely right. The more people, the more complicated. And I used to have my clients, back when I first started, I would tell them to go watch the movie, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And I don't even know how easy that is to get anymore. I don't tell people this anymore. It's such an old movie. It was, I think, from the 1940s with Humphrey Bogart, but it's so true. These guys start out to do a, like they're gonna go and search for gold, pan for gold or dig for gold in the mountains down in Mexico. And at the beginning, they're all friends. And one of them says, hey, I'll pay your part of the stake, buddy, we're buddies, and everything goes great until they find gold. And then all of a sudden they start shooting each other in the back, literally, and, fighting over the money. And that's what I see in business partnerships, that the problems usually don't occur in the beginning when the business is struggling to get going. The problems come up when they start to make money. And the biggest problem I see is each person saying, hey, I do all the work, but I'm having to share the profits with this other guy, this slacker here, And I think that each person knows everything they do themselves, but they're not aware of everything the other guy does. So it's real common for people to think they're doing more than the other guy. But sometimes there really is, though, someone that's not doing their share. Sometimes there's somebody that wants out, and you have to decide, well, what is their share worth? If they leave, what do I have to pay them for their share of this business? And that's another thing. I have a checklist as one of the handouts that's like a series of questions to go through. And one of the most important things you can do at the beginning is talk about that. What do you do if one person wants out? Do you have a formula that you use? Do you look at the last 3 years of net income, or do you look at gross revenue and net income? Or do you set a price at each annual meeting? Or, the thing with that, I like that idea, but the thing is people never do it. And so it looks beautiful in their company agreement or their shareholder agreement, but then they don't do it. So my answer to your question is, if you can do it on your own without another person, do it on your own. Anytime you involve somebody else, it can be, you can do more, you can accomplish more a lot of times as a team, but it does get a lot more complicated. People that get money from venture capitalists often find that instead of their own business, now they're just working as sort of like employees, because the venture capitalist wants a equity ownership and a voting interest in their business, and all of a sudden they're not their own boss anymore. I've got a story about that. That's, again, this is from real life. this guy started a business, and I don't want to identify him, so I'll say that it was a business where you could make hotel reservation. And this isn't actually what it was, but it was similar. You can make hotel reservations online and look at different prices for hotels. And he hired an employee to help, and everything went great. And the employee did a fabulous job. And so the founder of the business wanted to reward the employee by making him a 50% owner, which he did. But the problem is he was used to running this business as though he and the business were the same thing. So he was used to taking money out whenever he needed money. He kept doing that. He had the business hire his girlfriend who didn't actually have any skills that were useful to the company, and that sort of thing. And his co-owner didn't like that. He got very upset. He's like, wait a minute, you're taking all this money out that I should have had every time you get a distribution, I should have been getting one too. And you can't just go and hire people, that can't actually do any work for the company. And there was a really nasty lawsuit, and the business founder ended up losing his business. Basically, he got bought out by the other guy, and for not that great of a price. And he could have solved that problem up front to a great extent by really talking it through. And in his mind, he was like, hey, I started this business and I gave this guy a share in it. Come on, I deserve
Right.
some kind of compensation. But that isn't what it said on paper. That wasn't what the legal part of it said. And so he ended up losing everything he had worked for.
Ms.
So
Lamar,
uh-huh.
this is some great information, and we have still some great questions that are coming up, but we're getting close to the end, and I want to make sure that, we're respectful of everybody's time, especially yours, Ms. Lamar. And thank you. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedule. Now, those questions are not going on deaf ears, right? You're going to see in the chat, as well as we're going to provide Mrs. Lamar's contact information again. So that you can maybe make those inquiries. Now, Ms. Lamar, would it be okay if they make reference to this webinar to maybe get a couple of those questions, just at least the surface questions answered?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what my email address is for. Please ask, because I'm looking at it. These are some fabulous comments and questions. So yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ms. Sabrina, if you would please put, Mrs. Lamar's information to ensure that our observers from Facebook, as well as from, our audience, that we're able to get that information. There's nothing more important than being able to bring the subject matter expert to you. Again, Ms. Lamar, from myself, Juanita from Tree Shaker, as well as the Maestro Entrepreneur Center, we value your time and your expertise. But
it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now, I want to be able to remind you one more time as we get ready to transition into the Spanish version. I want to remind you to take this opportunity to go ahead and register at Buy Local Grow SA. Now, again, as I mentioned to you, this information is for Buy Local Grow SA, and it's a one-stop website of resources made available to our business owners such as yourselves. But it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to register. Worst case scenario, you take your phone and you use that QR code to make sure you go directly to the site, and you're able to do, within 5 or 10 minutes, and accesses resources, procurement opportunities, and really a new method of doing business with Buy Local Grow SA and here in San Antonio. But we don't want to forget the Maestro Centers here. It's not just to provide you information. We want to get to know you. And so we want you to learn more about the Maestro Center. So as you can see, there's a phone number on there. Reach out to us, set up an appointment, schedule some time to come out and just, tour the facility, because we have small office spaces that are valuable to you, because sometimes, as we're getting ready to open back up and do more business with local or other local entrepreneurs, we want to also learn and introduce you to other resources. Now, please connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and as all professionals do, utilize LinkedIn. You know, those are other things where we're able to announce some of the new things that are coming up. YouTube, our Master Center has YouTube, and we still have our podcasts and our webinars. But as always, we can't forget why we're here. We want to thank, you know, our supporters, our sponsors who have made this all possible. HEB, the City of San Antonio, the Economic Development Department, and Wells Fargo. But let's not forget again our supporters who believe in our mission to provide resources for our businesses. Now, don't switch off. For those of you who are Spanish speakers, we're going to do that transition. Give us a couple of minutes as we move forward to doing the Spanish version of this webinar. And as always, thank you, and thank you for being part of Webinar Wednesdays. Hola a todos y bienvenidos a Webinar Wednesday. Hoy este Webinar Wednesday es la estructura legal de los negocios y por qué es importante a conocer la diferencia. En este momento vamos a tomar, y bienvenidos a todos también que están en Facebook y los que están presentados aquí en Webinar Wednesday, porque estamos aquí para poder presentar sobre información que les puede ayudar a apoyar y notar la diferencia de su negocio. Pero antes que comenzamos, les quiero informar sobre Buy Local Grow SA. Buy Local Grow SA es un sitio web de recursos para pequeñas empresas. La Buy Local Grow SA es una plataforma diseñada para dueños de negocios como tú. A través del sitio web pueden accesar recursos gratis para diseñar oportunidades de adecuación hasta promociones de su negocio y aumentar visibilidad absolutamente gratis. Tenemos algunos mejores características nuevos y cómo es posible para publicar sus promociones comerciales por su perfil. Si están realizando una venta o presentando un nuevo producto, pueden usar Buy Local Grow SA como otra vía para anunciar sus servicios o productos. También agregamos oportunidades de adecuaciones donde pueden guardar a que los interesen. Junto también pueden esa posibilidad de publicar sus propias oportunidades de contratos. Solamente le toma como 5 minutos para registrarse. Una vez que reciben la prueba, pueden desbloquear nueva manera de formar negocio aquí en San Antonio. Pero como les dije siempre, no nomás están aquí para poder avanzar, pero se pueden registrar usando el QR code también y va directo. También están en inglés, pero también están en español. Pues en este momento también no me quiero olvidar por qué estamos aquí, por qué todo es posible. Queremos dar gracias a nuestros patrocinadores. Sabrina, ¿a quién le estamos dar gracias? Oh, perdón, se me había olvidado. Está la aplicación que está abierta ahorita para poder aumentar y tenemos calificaciones para poder, el programa de becas para pequeños negocios que son más de $15,000. Abrió esa aplicación, parece cuando fue, tenemos 2 semanas y se debe de vencer el 4 de noviembre, que es hoy a las 5. Pero hay otra oportunidad que la abrieron, la extendieron hasta el 6, hasta el viernes, hasta las 5 de la tarde. Aquí están las calificaciones para los negocios. Aprovechen que está la oportunidad y que pueda poner aplicación. Si acaso tienen preguntas, por favor, noten que pueden comunicarse con el Maestro Entrepreneur Center. Pero como siempre, aquí no están nomás para escucharme aquí. Estamos aquí para poder presentar información sobre que estamos aquí para apoyar. Sabrina, who do we thank? Queremos dar gracias a nuestros patrocinadores que ayudan a hacer todo esto posible. A HEB, la ciudad de San Antonio, el Departamento de Desarrollo Económico y Wells Fargo. Y también a los que los siguen apoyando sobre la misión para presentar recursos para nuestras pequeñas empresas. Pero como les dije, aquí no están para escucharme aquí. Aquí quieren a ver quién es el experto para poder presentar la información. Hoy tenemos la que es una panelista que se llama señora, uy, perdón, ah, ah, la señora Lamar. Ay, deme un momento.
Lo siento mucho, no hablo español. Pero
No se preocupe, señora Lamar. No se preocupe porque aquí estamos para poder ayudarle y facilitar lo que tenemos que presentar. So, dispensa que no tenía la pantalla lista. La señora Barbara Lamar ha el apoyo para ligar y contabilidad para las pequeñas empresas y sus proprietorios para más de 30 años. Uno de sus objetivos principales es asegurar que las tarifas pagadas serán una inversión rentabilidad para nuestros clientes. Por cada dólar pagado en horores y nuestras pequeñas, el cliente debe ganar más de $1 en préstamos horarios, en prestos y también incrementar ganancias comerciales. La señora Lamarr también tiene una propiedad que es un negocio. Por lo tanto, también tiene una buena comprensión de operar una pequeña empresa. Bienvenida, señora Lamarr. Va a estar aquí presentada, pero el señor Luis Rodríguez Puerto va a traducir la información que está presentando la señora Lamarr.
Muchas gracias, Juanita, por presentarme y muchas gracias, señora Lamarr, por estar acá. Pues hoy les voy a presentar la información, como nos dijo la señora Juanita, que nos proporcionó Barbara Lamar, sobre estructuras legales para una empresa. Para esto voy a utilizar ejemplos de la vida real para tratar de ilustrar los diferentes tipos de negocios, pero debido al acuerdo de confidencialidad que tiene la señora Lamar con sus clientes, no vamos a poder usar ningún tipo de nombre real o característica que pueda identificar a los clientes. Entonces, hemos cambiado los nombres y en algunos casos la naturaleza del negocio. Next slide, please. Gracias. Entonces, para empezar, tenemos las empresas unipersonales. Las empresas unipersonales son las más fáciles y también más fáciles económicamente de establecer. Como dice el nombre, las empresas unipersonales solo hay un propietario. Y si tiene más de una persona el negocio, no puede ser un propietario único, no puede ser una empresa unipersonal. Entonces, aquí el ejemplo, Rolando tiene un trabajo entregando paquetes de Amazon. Pero también su padre es plomero y Rolando trabaja casi todos los veranos desde que la secundaria a la preparatoria ayudándolo. Al principio Rolando solo lo ayudaba a sus amigos, a conocidos, en algunos trabajos de plomería. Pero dado el tiempo, él se va dando cuenta que puede ganar mucho más dinero trabajando como plomero que entregando paquetes de Amazon. Entonces, ¿qué hace? Entonces, ya que Rolando se da cuenta de esto, deja su trabajo de Amazon y empieza a trabajar como plomero de tiempo completo. Y le va muy bien, entonces él consigue ahorrar suficiente dinero para comprar un barco y también compra una casa que planea arreglar para vender, para obtener unas ganancias o tal vez para alquilar. Entonces él está en el proceso también de adquirir su licencia de plomero, trabajando bajo la supervisión de su padre. Uno de los riesgos de las empresas unipersonales, que lo vamos a ver también ahorita en el ejemplo, es que un día Rolando contrata a un asistente para instalar un calentador de agua. Pero este asistente es muy descuidado, entonces al soldar una tubería de cobre, hace un incendio y es un desastre en la casa del cliente. El propietario demanda a Rolando y gana el juicio por la cantidad de $85,000, mucho dinero. Entonces Rolando se ve obligado a presentar una petición de quiebra y pierde la casa que estaba arreglando y también pierde su barco. O sea, es uno de los ejemplos muy marcados de un riesgo de una empresa unipersonal. También En el slide pueden ver de que una persona es el propietario es responsable de las deudas comerciales. Es también muy simple el acto de crear y operar, y las ganancias o pérdidas son parte de la creación de impuestos del propietario. Next slide, please. Ahora hablaremos de la asociación general. Una asociación general es muy similar a del ejemplo pasado, una empresa unipersonal. Pero en esta hay más personas y también todos los socios tienen los mismos derechos y los mismos deberes. Entonces, tenemos el ejemplo de Rosa y Diana. Rosa y Diana son estilistas muy experimentadas y deciden abrir una peluquería juntas. Ambas son muy buenas en lo que hacen, son muy amigables y poco a poco, dado a peluquería que ponen, empiezan a ganar mucho más dinero, hasta mucho más dinero que sus maridos, que son electricistas. Rosa, dado a esto, que le va muy bien, abre una cuenta de ahorros para su hijo o hija para ir a la universidad. Y Diana empieza a comenzar a ahorrar para el pago inicial de su casa. Aquí va todo muy bien. Ahora, en este ejemplo, un día entra un hombre con un cabello muy largo y él quiere que decoloren el pelo blanco. Obviamente, Rosa le advierte de los riesgos de que esto le puede llevar a su cabello, pero él insiste de que quiere correr ese riesgo. Como se pueden imaginar, el producto usado era muy fuerte y hace que el hombre se le aquebrante y pierda mucho de su cabello. Ahora, resulta que este tipo es parte de una banda de heavy metal y su pelo es una de las características más importantes de que él tiene. Esto lo lleva a demandar el salón y alegando de que muchos de las pérdidas de los ingresos de lo que él hace, que es parte de una banda de heavy metal, a la caída de su pelo. Y demanda a Rosa y Diana por sufrimiento emocional. Rosa y Diana resuelven la demanda, pero por consecuencia ellas agotan sus cuentas de ahorro. Ahora vamos a ver que en una asociación general son más de una sola persona. Los socios son personalmente responsables por las deudas comerciales, también son simples y baratos de crear, y también las ganancias o pérdidas son parte de los propietarios. Pero ¿qué hubieran podido haber hecho Roland, Rosa y Diana para proteger todos esos activos personales reclamados por sus negocios? Next slide, please. Ellos hubieran podido haber formado una sociedad de responsabilidad limitada, o le podemos hacer un acrónimo de LLC. Si hubieran formado una sociedad de responsabilidad limitada de Texas, o ya sabemos que es una LLC para abreviar, habría sido mucho más difícil para las personas que demandaron a sus negocios que hubieran alcanzado su patrimonio personal, como por ejemplo la casa de Roland o los ahorros e inversiones de Rosa y Diana. En el nombre casi lo dice todo, es una responsabilidad limitada. Una responsabilidad limitada también es una forma un poquito más cara de hacer negocios de que una empresa unipersonal o una asociación general, ya que el Estado cambia la tarifa de presentación para registrar una LLC, y también se necesita para hacer una LLC un abogado o unos servicios legales en Zoom, por ejemplo, que también se debe pagar una tarifa. Hay que tener en cuenta de que para hacer una LLC de un solo miembro es a veces mucho mejor, ya que es mucho menos costosa porque es mucho menos costosa con los abogados y hay mucho menos complejidad, ya que es solo una persona. Ahora, para las empresas con más de una persona, es siempre recomendado consultar a un abogado con experiencia en derecho comercial, porque establecer una LLC de manera correcta con un buen acuerdo entre los miembros puede significar la diferencia entre el fracaso y el éxito de un negocio. La LLC es la forma más fácil de mantener y es mucho más flexible que una corporación, y no está obligada a elegir ningún tipo de ejecutivos o reuniones anuales. Ahora, también pueden ver en la presentación de que los socios son limitados, tienen responsabilidad limitada a las deudas comerciales, proporciona a socios un entorno de inversión, de retorno de inversión limitado, son más caras de crear que una asociación en una propiedad única, y la venta de los intereses de los miembros pueden tener lugar según la política de la empresa. Volveré a la sociedad responsable limitada si tenemos tiempo, y si alguien está interesado en más preguntas. También es una forma relativamente más cara de hacerlo, pero esto es porque se protege los activos de las personas involucradas, y también necesita de las entidades, o sea, hay una asociación y hay un socio. hay muy pocos casos en que recomiendan que una sociedad limitada para pequeñas empresas. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Bueno, ahora estos son otro tipo de estructuras. Está la sociedad limitada profesional. Bueno, para una sociedad limitada profesional, o la abreviamos también, es una PLC. PLLC. Y básicamente es lo mismo que una LLC, salvo que todos los miembros de esta sociedad deben estar licenciados en una misma profesión. Entonces, por ejemplo, aquí tenemos en la compañía de la señora Lamarr, que esta es su presentación en inglés, que es Rice Lamar, que es una PLC, es una sociedad limitada profesional. Y otros tipos de profesiones también pueden formar una PLC. Por ejemplo, pueden ser de arquitectos, ingenieros o médicos. Tenemos siguiente una corporación. Ahora, una corporación protege los activos personales de sus accionistas. Y el costo de establecerla es aproximadamente el costo de establecer una LLC. Ahora, la diferencia es de que una corporación es mucho menos flexible que una LLC, ya que el Estado tiene muchos más requisitos, como por ejemplo el requisito de tener ejecutivos y reuniones. Ahora, hay ciertos casos en que es recomendable establecer una estructura corporativa a un cliente, pero la mayoría de las pequeñas empresas están mucho mejor con una LLC. Ahora, tenemos una corporación profesional. También es similar a una corporación, nada más que una corporación profesional, o una PC para abreviarla, es una versión corporativa de una PLLC. Todos los accionistas deben tener una licencia en la misma profesión, como por ejemplo, médicos, arquitectos o doctores. O ingenieros, perdón. Ahora tenemos una corporación sin fines de lucro. Una corporación sin fines de lucro se usa generalmente para organizaciones benéficas o organizaciones como una asociación de vecinos. Podemos hablar de esto más tarde si alguien tiene tiempo y si alguien está interesado. Y tenemos la serie LLC, de que es otro tipo de entidad relativamente nuevo que permite la configuración de una empresa central con varias otras empresas que operen debajo. Eso se utiliza mayormente en los negocios inmobiliarios, por ejemplo. Next slide, please. Ahora, ¿cómo manejar una LLC? Y para esto quiero entrar a este ejemplo. Entonces tenemos a Roberto. Entonces Roberto inicia un negocio que permite a los viajeros ver muchos listados de diferentes hoteles en muchos destinos y además también se puede hacer una reserva en línea. Entonces a Roberto le está yendo muy bien. El negocio va muy bien, está muy sólido y contrata un empleado. Este empleado se llama Sergio y para ayudar, Sergio hace que el negocio crezca y después de algunos años, Roberto decide establecer una LLC y toma la decisión de hacer que Sergio sea un accionista igualitario del negocio. Ahora, como un propietario único, Roberto no tenía ninguna necesidad de preocuparse por aspectos legales de qué era lo que le pertenecía o qué no le pertenecía, porque era el único dueño de su empresa. Ahora, porque también todo lo que pertenecía al negocio le pertenecía a Roberto. Pero después de que él crea la LLC, Roberto ya no es el dueño de los activos del negocio. Si Roberto tomara el dinero de la LLC para comprar algo para él, sería similar que alguien estuviera sacando dinero a mi bolsillo. Esto es uno de los problemas mucho más comunes que se puede notar cuando un propietario único agrega a una persona al negocio. Como propietario único, el empresario no está acostumbrado a pensar a qué le pertenece a él o qué le pertenece al negocio, ¿no? Entonces, usar el dinero de su LLC para comprar algún tipo de artículo personal, como por ejemplo combustibles, o usar dinero para comprar algo para el LLC, se le conoce o se le denomina como mezcla. Esta mezcla puede hacer que pierda su protección de responsabilidad y también puede hacer molestar mucho el socio comercial porque está juntando otros factores. En el caso de Roberto y Sergio, Sergio habla con Roberto sobre lo que está pasando, pero Roberto continúa haciéndolo, el uso del dinero de la LLC, y no solo eso, sino que contrata a su novia que no tiene ningún tipo de habilidad ni conocimiento de lo que están haciendo en el negocio. Esto pasa porque Roberto piensa de que como él comenzó el negocio, tiene algún tipo de derecho o compensación por haberlo hecho. Moral y prácticamente hablando, él sí tiene cierto derecho, pero legalmente hablando, Roberto había tomado dinero que no le pertenecía a él, porque hace la LLC. Lo que sucede es que Sergio termina demandando a Roberto, y Roberto pierde la demanda y por consecuente también pierde el negocio. Ahora, ¿qué habría podido haber hecho Roberto para evitar el final de su relación comercial con Sergio y la pérdida de su negocio? Bueno, hay alguna forma de que él habría podido hacer esto sin sacar dinero a la empresa y sin mezclar. Algunas de las formas de que él podría haber hecho esto son las siguientes. Primero, que por ahí lo más importante es que uno, cuando inicia el negocio con otra persona, es tener un acuerdo sobre los privilegios y deberes de cada persona. Si Roberto sentía de que merecía algún tipo de compensación para iniciar el negocio, por iniciar el negocio, debió haberlo discutido con Sergio desde el principio y tal vez haberle dado a Sergio una participación menor, por ejemplo el 25% de la LLC en lugar de la participación del 50%. O tal vez Roberto y Sergio podrían haber acordado que Roberto tenía derecho a distribuciones de cierta cantidad mínima antes que se distribuyera los fondos a Sergio. Entonces, segundo, otra cosa que él hubiera podido haber hecho es determinar por adelantado quién tomaría las decisiones cuando el negocio estuviera funcionando. Muchas veces la persona responsable de las operaciones diarias, o alguien puede ser responsable por las operaciones diarias, mientras que la otra persona puede haber tomado las decisiones relacionadas con el financiamiento. Una cosa es que Roberto podría haber hecho fuese que reservarse el derecho a tomar las decisiones de contratación, por ejemplo. Aunque aún podría haber tenido problemas por contratar a su novia, pero ya había estado discutido de antemano. Y tercero, es repasar la lista de verificación sección por sección. Esta lista básicamente dice, por ejemplo, dice cómo se distribuyen las ganancias. Entonces, aquí Roberto podría haber reservado más distribución para sí mismo hasta haber sido compensado por su papel de fundador. O también en algunos casos puede haber asignaciones especiales de ganancias y pérdidas imponibles. Esto puede ser importante si el contrapropietario de la empresa se encuentra en una categoría impositiva más alta que el otro. Ahora, ¿qué pasa si alguien quiere salirse? O sea, ¿cómo tendría el valor de salirse de su participación en el negocio? Y si también, si esto está determinado, si alguien quiere salirse. Ahora, si se puede encontrar una fórmula o una forma determinada antes de que esto suceda, como tenerlo de preparación, hace las cosas mucho más fáciles. Si un dueño quiere vender parte de su negocio a otros dueños o a alguien más. Al principio, todos estarán motivados por lo que es justo para todos. Pero una vez que hay un comprador y un vendedor, cada persona tendrá un propio punto de vista. Entonces es mucho mejor, si se puede, hablar de antes. También se tiene que tener en cuenta de que, dado que Texas es un estado de propiedad comunitaria, esto significa que si los miembros que están en una relación matrimonial ya estén casados en una LLC, su cónyuge posee automáticamente el 50% de sus acciones. Y si este no pone reglamentos y límites adecuados en su acuerdo en su empresa, podría terminar con el esposo o la esposa de alguien como su copropietario, cuando realmente no estaba planeándolo. Cuanto más claro puede ser sobre lo que se espera de cada copropietario, el negocio va a funcionar mejor. Y a veces un miembro será un inversor silencioso. Y si este es el caso, la persona realmente que opera la empresa puede ser nombrado un gerente. El acuerdo de la empresa puede también requerir una meditación antes de presentar una demanda y se recomienda mucho esto ya que los juicios son costosos y tienen un precio emocional para todos. Can you go to the next slide, please? Ahora, los impuestos dependiendo de la estructura Ok, comencemos con las empresas unipersonales y de sociedad colectivas. Estas personas pagan impuestos federales sobre sus ganancias netas. En el caso de un propietario único, el propietario único reporta el 100% de las ganancias netas del negocio. Para una sociedad limitada, cada socio paga su parte. En el ejemplo de la peluquería de Diana y Rosa, si el ingreso del salón por el año fue de $150,000, Diana y Rosa reportarían cada una $75,000 en sus declaraciones de impuestos personales. La empresa unipersonal informa sus ingresos en el anexo C del formulario 1040 y los ingresos de la sociedad son declarados en una declaración de impuestos separada, en el formulario 1065. La cantidad de ingresos de cada socio es informada al otro socio en el anexo K1. La información del anexo K1 se transfiere a la página 2 de anexo E en la declaración de impuestos individuales de cada socio en el formulario 1040. En las empresas unipersonales y de socios pagan los dos impuestos, un impuesto en la ganancia y un impuesto por trabajar por cuenta propia. El impuesto sobre el trabajo por cuenta propia consiste en el Seguro Social y Medicare. El impuesto combinado es del 15.3% de la ganancia neta. Por lo tanto, en el ejemplo anterior de Diana y Rosa, debían pagar un impuesto sobre el ejemplo propio de $11,475, además de cualquier impuesto sobre las ganancias que deban. El impuesto sobre el trabajo por cuenta propia se informa en el anexo SE. Ahora hablemos un poco de los impuestos en una LLC. Una LLC paga los impuestos de manera diferente y esto depende de cuántos miembros hay y si hay una elección de impuestos ya hecha. El valor predeterminado para la declaración de los impuestos federales sobre la ganancia de una LLC de un solo miembro es muy diferente y se le llama una entidad no considerada. Ahora, para los fines de impuestos federales, la LLC es un propietario único. Aunque esta sigue siendo una LLC, según la ley estatal en todo tiempo, sus ingresos netos se informan en el anexo C, al igual que una empresa unipersonal. Pero la LC, si tiene varios miembros, informa como una sociedad general en el formulario 1065, que se lleva también en el anexo E en el formulario 1040 de cada socio. Y estas son las únicas formas de informar ingresos de una LLC. Y pueden elegir informar ingresos de la LLC como si fuera una corporación. Esto lleva a dos opciones tributarias de una corporación. El primer método de la corporación es que pague su propio impuesto. Para hacer esto, se tendría que presentar el formulario 1120. La tasa impositiva para declaración de impuestos sobre la ganancia de la empresa es fija, o sea, de que es siempre el 21%. Y la segunda forma en que la corporación se puede lidiar con el impuesto federal sobre la ganancia es pagar impuestos como una corporación S. Si esto se decide, la corporación informa sus ingresos y gastos en el formulario 1120S. Los miembros de la LLC obtienen un K1 e informan los ingresos en la página 2 en el anexo E, como lo habrían hecho en una asociación. Pero hay una diferencia. Los ingresos de la corporación S no están sujetos a los impuestos sobre el trabajo por cuenta propia. Puede pensar de que la elección S es una obvia. Es algo obvio, pero no siempre es una elección correcta. Esto depende de los ingresos netos de la LLC. Y a veces esto surge otro problema. El IRS desaprueba el uso de la elección S para evitar pagar el impuesto sobre el trabajo por cuenta propia. Por lo tanto, se auditarán del formulario 1120S de su LLC. Podrían intentar argumentar de que parte de la ganancia neta debería haber sido pagada como sueldos a los miembros, no pago de impuestos sobre el trabajo por cuenta propia sobre los ingresos salariales, pero sí paga el seguro social y Medicare. Entonces usted estaría pagando el 50% y la empresa pagaría el otro 50%. Al final siempre es el mismo, siempre se paga el 15.3%. Pero sin embargo, aún puede ahorrar algún dinero si tiene buenos argumentos de por qué los salarios de los miembros son inferiores a los ingresos netos. Eso fue toda la presentación. No sé si tienen alguna pregunta y muchas gracias por escucharme.
Gracias, Luis. Muy bien presentado. Como siempre, es información que se puede utilizar con nuestras empresas. Como la señora Lamarr dice, cada entity es diferente. Y ahorita tenemos la oportunidad de hacer preguntas para la señora Lamarr, como hacemos en inglés. Y aquí está también Luis para poder ayudarlos a poder a presentar las preguntas a la señora Lamar. So, en este momento le abrimos la oportunidad a los que están presentados a poder a escuchar a la señora Lamar. Hubo una pregunta en la presentación en inglés que querían, déjame pedir cuando están comenzando a hacer las preguntas, es que sole proprietor, diferencia, ¿qué es la diferencia entre sole proprietor y LLC? Y también si puede ser un C Corp para poder ayudar con las tasaciones para el año que viene. Y la señora, Lamar está aquí presentada, se la voy a hacer la pregunta en inglés. Ms. Lamar, I know that we have you on here, and as we get ready to ask questions, answer questions in Spanish, Luis is also going to be here, but I wanted to address one of the questions from the previous in English. Voy a hacer una pregunta a la señora Lamar que se presentó en inglés, que the benefits of being a sole proprietor to becoming an S Corp to help with tax burdens. That was one of the questions that was said in English. And Ms. Luis is going to help us interpret Ms. Lamar's response in Spanish. ¿Verdad, Luis? ¿Me lo vas a ayudar a poder apoyarlos con esa información?
Claro que sí.
Okay. So I'll say a sentence and then pause and you can translate it. Is that the way you want to do it?
Yes, ma'am. Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, so the difference between a sole proprietorship and an LLC. First of all, there's a difference in liability. If you have an LLC and somebody sues your business, that lawsuit's probably going to stop with the LLC because it's difficult to get through an LLC to the individual owner under Texas law.
¿Traduzco ahorita, no? Sí.
Por favor.
Ok. Bueno, entonces dijo de que para empezar, la diferencia entre una LLC y una empresa de personal única es el tipo de, si hay una demanda, la demanda se para en la LLC, mientras que en una empresa única, personal única, la demanda sigue hasta la persona.
Okay. There is also a difference in taxes in that an LLC can make an election to be taxed as though they were a corporation. And so they can just, even though they're still an LLC under state law, they can say, hey, I'm going to file my federal tax returns as though I were a corporation.
Otra diferencia es de que una LLC puede tomar la elección de pagar impuestos como una corporación. Y aunque siempre se mira que es una LLC bajo el estado siempre tiene la decisión de pagar esos impuestos como si fuera una corporación.
A corporation can file two different kinds of taxes. They can file as a C corporation or an S corporation.
La corporación puede ser pagar impuestos como una corporación S o como una corporación C.
Okay. A C corporation pays its own taxes, and there's a flat rate of 21% for corporation net income.
Okay. Una corporación C paga impuestos fijos del 21%.
Okay. An S corporation passes its income through to the shareholders, or if it's an LLC, to the LLC members. So it doesn't pay any taxes itself. It passes the income through to the owners.
Una corporación S pasa los impuestos a los miembros de la corporación, o si es una LLC, pasa los impuestos a las personas en esa LLC.
Now, if you're a one member LLC and you don't make any sort of tax election, you have to file your tax return on Schedule C of your individual tax return, just as though you were a sole proprietor.
Si usted es una persona que tiene una LLC y solo es una persona, usted tiene que demostrar esos impuestos. Can you repeat in which section?
You have to file your taxes as though you were a sole proprietor on Schedule C
Okay.
of your personal income tax return.
Okay. Tiene que pagar los impuestos como si fuera tener una empresa de persona única en la parte C.
Your net income on Schedule C is subject to self-employment tax of 15.3%.
Su ganancia en la sección C tiene un impuesto del 15.3%.
And that's on top of your income tax. That's in addition to your regular income tax.
Y eso va, o sea, aún falta el impuesto sobre las ganancias.
So what you gain by making the S election, your net profits from the S corporation, you don't have to pay the self-employment tax on those profits.
Y lo que gana por hacer de que es una corporación C es de que no tiene que pagar esos impuestos como si estuviera autocontratándose.
There are costs involved, though, in making the election. You have to file a separate tax return, and you have to pay yourself a salary.
Pero esto conlleva costos, ya que se debe de pagar por hacer este cambio y se tiene que poner usted un salario.
And there's cost associated with doing you have to pay your tax return preparer, you have to pay someone to do your payroll taxes, and you have to pay unemployment tax and that sort of thing. So there's a break-even point where you could say, all right, if I make this much money, it's going to be good to make this election. And if I make under that amount of money, it's not going to be worth it.
Y esto, o sea, se tiene que analizar bien porque hay un punto de quiebre, porque hay costos considerados con esta elección, como por ejemplo alguien que haga sus impuestos o que prepare sus impuestos. Entonces uno tiene que analizar cuál es el punto de quiebre, si lo hace o no lo hace.
Okay, so those are the major differences. Just the liability, the personal liability, and the taxation.
Entonces, para concluir, las diferencias más grandes son el tipo de impuestos de que llevan y también dónde para si hay algún tipo de demanda.
Ms. Lamar, another good question, as we discovered in English, in the English version, otra cosa que descubrimos cuando estamos presentando en inglés is registration of the sole proprietor, right? Didn't we discover something about that? And lo que descubrimos es la manera en dónde y la manera que se puede registrar el sole proprietor. Y Luis los va a ayudar en traducir la información que los va a informar la señora Lamar. So, Ms. Lamar, what is it that we discovered about, filing for that sole proprietor in Bexar County versus state? Because that was very informative.
Yeah, if you're a sole proprietor, you file an assumed name certificate. Also, some people call it a DBA. You file it with the Bexar County clerk, and you go to the Bexar County website to do this. If you're
Luis,
a registered...
Wait, Mr. Lamar.
Okay.
Luis, go ahead.
Ok. Para hacer esto, para registrarse como una empresa unipersonal, se tienen que ir donde un notario del condado de Bexar County para hacer esto.
Okay. And if you're a registered entity, like a corporation or an LLC, you go to the Secretary of State's website to file an assumed name certificate.
Y si es una corporación, puede ir al website del secretario de Estado para recibir su certificado.
Another thing we discussed that's really important, filing the assumed name certificate, if you're a sole proprietor, does not relieve you of personal liability.
Otra cosa que descubrieron es de que aunque tengan el certificado de una empresa unilateral, esto no les quita ninguna responsabilidad hacia ningún tipo de demanda.
Esa es muy buena información porque en realidad uno se puede tener la confianza que está registrado correcta, ¿verdad? Pero en realidad, hasta cuando hacemos las preguntas, estamos notando que hay otros recursos, otros sitios que tienen que ir a registrarse. What I was saying is, this is very important information because there's other resources and other sites that we need to go to be able to register correctly. En este momento, sea claro, quiero clarificar que tenemos la oportunidad de hablar con la señora Lamarr y aquí está Luis para poder apoyar con la información, a presentarla en español. Si tienen una pregunta, aprovechen la oportunidad que tenemos la señora aquí, Lamarr, que no nomás es una CPA y tiene más de 30 años de experiencia, pero también hay preguntas que en realidad uno no piensa. Bueno, yo digo, para mí, yo no entendía la diferencia con un DBA y por qué tenemos que tener el DBA, ¿verdad? Pero también tenemos que entender la diferencia, que dónde registrarlos. Señora Lamarr, una pregunta que no pudimos presentar en la que estaban en inglés es, and I'll say it in Spanish and I'll say it in English so you can respond. Se tiene uno que registrar en el condado de Bear, si estamos ya registrados en el condado de Hidalgo. In other words, the question was from the previous one is, do you have to register in Bear County if you're living in Hidalgo County?
No, if you're doing business in Bear County, you do. If you're living and doing business in Hidalgo County, you register there. You register in the county where you're working. And if you're working in multiple counties, you register in all of them under that name.
Okay.
If you're an entity and you file an assumed name certificate with the state of Texas, you can, there's a little box you can click that says, hey, this applies to all counties in Texas.
Ok. Entonces, si uno básicamente tiene que registrarse en el condado donde trabaja. Entonces, si uno está trabajando en el condado de Bexar, se registra en Bexar, y si está trabajando en Hidalgo, se registra en Hidalgo. Ahora, si alguien quiere trabajar en múltiples condados, lo puede hacer cuando esté haciendo el certificado, puede hacer una marca, una caja, diciendo de que va a trabajar en múltiples estados, en múltiples condados.
And by the way, puedo leer español. So if people want to email me questions in Spanish, puedo leer y escritar español. So they can feel free to email me questions in Spanish. I just no puedo hablar porque sueño estúpida.
No, señora Lamarr, fantástico. Estoy tan fascinada en la idea que puede responder con las preguntas sobre correo electrónico, porque en veces sí es difícil poder tener una conversación. Pero por eso la tenemos aquí, porque vemos la pasión y la dedicación a su comunidad a poder apoyar a los que también hablan español o solamente también en español. Otra pregunta, si tenemos oportunidad, no aprovechen, aquí estamos, y también si tienen la pregunta en Facebook, que estamos live, probablemente no podemos responder en este momento, pero pueden mandar un correo electrónico a Mari at maestrocenter.org, y también esa información se va a poder presentar y la pueden pedir. Otra pregunta que tuvimos antes es, ¿cómo se aplica la forma 2553 cuando estás formando un LLC? In other words, I'm going to ask her in English.
I know what it, I know.
Perfect.
Sí, puedo entender español.
Okay.
So the Form 2553 is what you file to make an S election. So if you're an LLC and you say, I want to be taxed as though I'm a corporation under federal tax law,
Mhm.
and not only that, I want to be an S corporation. That's the form you file, 2553.
Básicamente es si una persona quiere pagar impuestos como una corporación S, se tiene que llenar esa forma para hacer la elección de que quiere pagar los impuestos de esa manera.
¿Otra pregunta? Señora Lamar, como siempre, presenta tan buena información. Ahorita en el momento vamos a presentar la información, la manera que puede comunicarse con la señora Lamar. Sabrina va a poner la información sobre su negocio. Y como siempre, gracias, señora Lamar, por tomando su tiempo. Y todos que están aquí presentados, aprovechando la oportunidad de hacer las preguntas. Gracias, Luis, por estar aquí para traducir la información de inglés a español. Fue un provecho a todos y también igual para mí, porque como yo también tengo mi propio negocio, esa oportunidad puede entender la formación. Señora Lamar, gracias. Le agradecemos su tiempo, su experiencia en la manera que se presentó tan profesional.
It's been my pleasure and thank you for having me.
Claro, claro. Sabrina, podemos poner can we please put Ms. Lamar's information in case someone wants to contact them briefly? Aquí le estamos presentando a la señora Barbara Lamar, es abogada y CPA de Lamar Associates. Su oficina, está anotando aquí el número de teléfono y también su correo electrónico. Pero como siempre, aprovechen a poder hacer esa pregunta. Noten en el subject line que yo escucho su presentación aquí con el Maestro Entrepreneur Center y como siempre, estamos aquí para servirles. Pero no queremos olvidarlos por qué estamos aquí, ¿verdad? Queremos presentarles otra oportunidad sobre Buy Local Grow SA. Y va a poner la información ahorita Sabrina. Queremos que otra vez tengan la oportunidad de registrarse con Buy Local Grow SA. Es un sitio web de recursos como es para pequeñas empresas como ustedes. Es absolutamente gratis y puede ayudar la visibilidad. Y como les digo, aquí está la información que pueden también utilizar la cámara de su teléfono, usar el QR code donde va directa al sitio. La información no nomás solamente está en inglés, pero también está en español. Y aprovechen la oportunidad de poder registrarse. Solamente, como les dije, le toma como 5 minutos para registrarse. Y una vez que reciben el apruebo, pueden desbloquear la manera de hacer negocio con San Antonio. Pero también aquí estamos para servirles. Queremos que aprendan más sobre Maestro Entrepreneur Center. Y queremos que conozcan y va a presentar ahorita la información a la señorita Sabrina sobre el Maestro Entrepreneur Center. Aquí está. Aprende más sobre el Maestro Entrepreneur Center. Le estamos presentando una información donde pueden llamar, hacer una cita con nosotros y a conocer el edificio, porque tenemos oficinas donde pueden utilizar los recursos. Hay otras pequeñas empresas también. Y no nomás aprovechen a poder hacer una cita para poder conocer el edificio. Se pueden comunicar con nosotros sobre Facebook, Instagram y Twitter. Y como todos son tan profesionales, utilizan el link de LinkedIn, porque ahí se pueden comunicarse, hacer otras presentación, con sus productos y servicios. También tenemos a YouTube y todavía tenemos nuestros podcasts y webinars. Siempre busquen la manera de comunicarse con el Maestro Entrepreneur Center. Aquí estamos para servirles y apoyar. Todo esto es posible. Y va a poner la señorita Sabrina, ¿a quién les vamos a dar gracias? Who do we give thanks to, Sabrina? Como siempre, queremos dar gracias a nuestros patrocinadores que ayudan a hacer todo esto posible. A H-E-B, la Ciudad de San Antonio, el Departamento de Desarrollo Económico y a Wells Fargo. Y también, como están notando, a todos los que están aquí para apoyarlos por la misión, para poder presentar recursos para nuestras pequeñas empresas. Y gracias a todos que están aquí para escuchar la información y los vemos el próximo miércoles.